Hello, I'm Michael Voris.
And I'm Father Pablo, Catholic missionary priest. We really want you to watch every week the one true faith. Had you left that one true faith, please come home. We're waiting for you because we love you.
Hello everyone, welcome to The One True Faith, the show we say is the most disturbing hour on television because we talk about eternal life. And tonight, very directly tonight, our topic is quite simply, are you happy? Well, are you happy? Yeah. You are? Well, if you saw hordes of people scurrying around with pickaxes and pans on their back and backpacks and all of that, you could probably rightly conclude that they hadn't found all the gold they wanted, because they're still looking for it. If you saw medical labs and research facilities being built all over the place, you could rightly conclude that health had not yet been found, because they're building places to try to find health. When you see people crowding into theaters or bars or nightclubs or sporting events, you can rightly conclude that pleasure has not yet been found, or they wouldn't be going to these places to try to find pleasure, right? See how difficult, see the mental topics we grasp on this show. They're so tough to get sometimes. The very fact that you can even conceive of a greater happiness than you now possess means you aren't really happy, because you can think about a greater one. If you were perfect, you would be happy. I would be happy. Now, no doubt at one time or another, all of us have achieved something we thought would bring us happiness, a career, a move, a job, a spouse, whatever. But poof, we realized sooner or later we came back down to earth. It didn't make us happy. Christmas morning when we were a child, or when we're going on a vacation as an adult, how many of us on Christmas morning, and by the time we got to bed Christmas night, we're like, well, it was okay. It wasn't exactly what I wanted. And anybody who's ever gone on vacation will admit in their heart of hearts that the two happiest days of that vacation were the day they left and the day they came back from vacation, the day you got home. Wealth? Think wealth will make you happy? Well, the more you place your happiness in it, the more you are afraid of losing your wealth. How about fame? Everyone must be famous, have a great reputation. Well, fame is like a reputation. Once the ball starts rolling, people want to kick it. That's how fame is. You want perfect happiness. We all want perfect happiness, but we don't have it. Life is a series of disappointments and shocks and disillusionments. Now, you'd have to be Irish to say something like that, and I'm Irish, so something like that. How have you reacted to these disappointments? When these disappointments come into our lives, how do we respond to them? Ultimately, there's only two ways we respond. We become more cynical, or we become more religious. That's it. Scratching your head. What's he mean by that? More religious. Let's talk about cynical first. If you become cynical, you then decide, well, you know what? Everything I can get in life is only what I can grab, so you start grabbing for everything. You grab everything you can possibly get in life, and you say, well, that's it. I need to get everything out of life I possibly can. So every sensory pleasure and appetite must be filled, and every time something comes along, you try to fill it. Take it into yourself. You try to have a good time. That becomes the goal of existence. Or, on the other side, you become more religious. You become religious by discerning this one simple truth. If I want happiness so badly, then I must have been made for it. I must have been created for it. Like the fish who struggles if the second you take him out of the tank, starts flopping. Why? Because he wants to be happy back in the water where he belongs. It's his nature. Or the bird. You put a bird in a cage, it goes crazy because the bird wants to go out and fly. It's its nature to fly, to stay aloft. These are their natures, and they move. Their goal is to move towards, to fulfill their nature. My nature, your nature, all of our human natures want happiness. That's why we seek it so badly. We fight for it. We yearn for it. This is what every single sitcom, melodrama, movie, real-life drama is about, because people are fighting for their little piece of happiness. Now, they might be looking in the wrong place, but that's what they're doing. They're fighting for what they think is going to make them happy. But in the end, I don't have it. I don't get it. I fight for it. I wind up with, I've got it, and then I don't have it anymore. So I must be doing something wrong. That's an honest evaluation. I must be doing something wrong. I'm looking in the wrong places. I need to look in God. That's the one who made my nature, and so He's the one that's going to provide for my nature. And if He made my nature to desire happiness, then He is the key to that happiness. I can choose to look for a good time, or I can choose to look for a God time. I can look for pleasures, or I can look for joys. And that's the topic of today, joy and pleasure. There is a world of difference between joy and pleasure, a world of difference between the two. In fact, people who look for a good time, and that's what they make their life's goal, they become enslaved by their pleasures. But people who look for a God time become free and become liberated in their joys. People who look for a good time, say, for example, in chocolate. I can relate. Love chocolate. I hate Lent. I love chocolate. It gives great pleasure. Of course it does. It's a nice gift from God. You know, it tastes good. It's a good pleasure. But even the craziest chocolate lover in the world will never eat a piece of chocolate and say, what great joy. Say it's a great pleasure, but they'll never say great joy. You can also quickly tire of pleasures. But you know, you never tire of joys. You notice that? You never tire of a joy, but we tire of pleasures pretty darn quickly. Pleasures can increase to the point, in fact, where they are actually no longer pleasures. They can even hurt. You know, a drink feels good. 25 drinks the next morning feels pretty miserable. Tickling. You can tickle someone, they'll laugh, but they hurt. Pleasures can become painful if they come to us too greatly. But the joys of a good conscience or finding a truth, discovering a truth, these never, ever bring pain. They increase the joy. A light can be so bright, as we were talking about earlier, a light can be so bright that it can blind the eye, but light can never blind the mind, the light of truth. The more light you have, the more light your mind sees, the more it wants to be in the light. It's just the opposite between pleasure and joy. Have you also noticed that as the desire for pleasure increases, the satisfaction from it decreases? Just ask an addict. Ask an addict. So people build their lives around this kind of philosophy. I have to have a good time. I have to have this. I have to have this. What kind of philosophy of life bases itself on the law of diminishing returns? In order to get this same satisfaction, I have to have more of it. It's a finite world, people. You're never going to get everything. You're never going to get enough, because there isn't enough to satisfy an ever-growing appetite. Pleasures also, have you noticed, are greater in anticipation than they are realization. What do they say? The half the joy is the waiting, half the pleasure is the waiting. You get there and it's like, it's okay, you know, it's better than a stick in the eye, but it's not everything I was hoping for. Joy also is the opposite in this situation. You know, sometimes you get everything you want and you get just the opposite when it comes to pleasure. Judas got 30 pieces of silver. It's what he wanted. It's what he conspired with. He finally got it, and he was so filled with disgust that he threw them away, threw them back into the temple. If you do nothing other than to seek happiness, to seek after happiness, by this weird twist of nature, you actually never get it. You spend your life spinning your wheels chasing it, so that what happens is that many people today prefer to seek after the truth but never really find it. Their happiness, they think, is in pursuing the truth without ever getting it. As one person said, they turn the pages of the book of life, but they never actually read it. They're extraordinarily cynical. We know these people. We know a lot of these people. This is why cynicism sets in. You know, a cynic is one who's been described as knowing the price of everything and the value of nothing. It's a pretty good definition of a cynic. Cynics blame things. They blame people for why they don't have happiness. If only I had another spouse. If only I had another job. If I only lived there instead of here, then I'd be happy. We have fairy tales built around this stuff. There's a reason they're fairy tales, because they're not true. For these type of people, this type of people, happiness always resides outside of them. It's always dependent on something out there. That's the problem. That's why interiorly they're never happy. They never have happiness because they're always chasing after it somewhere out there. They chase mirages, as a famous person once said. They chase mirages until at last death catches up to them. Such is the life of pleasure. Life will be miserable, it will be disordered, because happiness for them is a byproduct, not the goal. They're chasing after something that will give them happiness. They're not chasing happiness itself. Until you find out your purpose in life, you're never going to find that elusive good time. It won't happen. You need to know your purpose. You know, when we talk about pleasure, there's lots of things, because pleasure is tied to the body and joy is tied to the soul. So because pleasure is tied to the body, it has certain conditions. Pleasure is affected by things that affect the body. The first one we can look at, a shortcoming of pleasure, is the issue of time. Time is the greatest obstacle in the world to happiness. Time is. For one, pleasures must be enjoyed individually in time. You can't read a good book and be absorbed in the book while you're absorbed in the football game. You can't do it. Your mind can't do that. Why? Because what's being given to you, it's the senses, it's the body that these pleasures are processing. And the body can't process more than one pleasure at the same time. Can't do it. It's not built like that. So time becomes an enemy of happiness, becomes an obstacle for it. You can't surf off the waters of Hawaii while you're skiing in Aspen at the same time. These pleasures have to come one after another in time. And since from the second we're born, tick-tock, that clock starts, we've got a limited amount of pleasures we can enjoy, but we want them forever. We want that happiness forever. But tick-tock, tick-tock, listen to that clock. Every morning you get up, that's one day closer you are to eternity, and one more day that's passed into a place that no longer exists that you can never go back to. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Archbishop Fulton Sheen used to say, from the moment we are born, we begin to ripe and rot and rot. And I certainly know that's true of vision, so I have to wear glasses. Hit 40 and your eyes rot. Secondly, you're engaged in some deep pleasure. Whenever you're engaged in some deep pleasure, what do? You look up at the clock and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how fast the time flew by. The time flew by. On this earth, whenever you're engaged in even something that's giving you the remotest amount of pleasure or happiness, time flies by. Time robs you of that happiness because it comes to an end that much faster. Time is the enemy of happiness. Perhaps then, time or happiness has something to do with the eternal, where time doesn't exist and the happiness can remain. See, you can find happiness in time, but what you really want is happiness that is timeless. That's what we all want. Now, there is a whole other way to approach our disappointments in life other than trying to have a good time. And that's the problem with the world today, that everyone's off trying to have a good time, trying to chase after happiness. But for the more wise, this person could say, can ask the question of themselves, why am I disappointed in something? How can I avoid being disappointed? Because if the disappointment is what's robbing me of my happiness, well, let me address the disappointment. I'm disappointed ultimately because of the great gulf that exists between my expectations and my reality. That's why I'm always disappointed. That's the source of disappointment in this life. See, my soul can imagine much, and the desire for happiness originates in my soul. My soul can imagine a lot, but my body and the world are limited. So I can imagine a mountain of gold. I'm never going to see it. I can imagine a castle made of diamonds, and I'm never walking through the front gate of that. Every earthly ideal is lost the moment it's possessed. It looks solid until you reach for it, and the moment you grasp it, it turns to mist and goes away. Wow, now there's a cheery thought. The more material the ideal, the greater the disappointment is going to be. The more spiritual, the less the disappointment is going to be. So how true are the words that come from the mouth of truth himself? Do not store up treasures in this earth, on this earth, where thieves break in and moths and rust corrode. Rather store up treasures for yourself in heaven, where neither thieves break in, nor moths nor rust corrode. For where your treasure is, there lies your heart as well. This is why those who seek after spiritual ideals are never really unhappy. They may be temporarily frustrated by not possessing the whole, but each time they return to the quest, they return and they receive more happiness than they had before. They advance down the road of happiness. They're not at the end yet, but they advance and they become more happy. That's just the opposite for the pleasure seeker. The more pleasure he gets, the more he wants, the greater his appetite becomes. This weird twist of nature, because it's the body trying to fill in a limited capacity that the soul wants infinite. So the appetite is infinite, but the body can only maintain some of it, and only in time and only in succession. The very fact that we can enjoy the fraction tells us there must be a whole. Would a duck have the instinct to swim if there was no water? Would there be eyes to look out and behold beauty if there was no beauty? Would a baby cry for nourishment if there was no such thing as food? Of course not. And would we long for unending life, for truth, for ecstatic love, if there was not such a thing as perfect life, perfect truth, and perfect love? We wouldn't have the capacity to long for it because it wouldn't exist. Now we're going to talk about where all this leads us right after this, as we ask the age-old question, are you happy? We'll be right back right after this. Everybody, welcome back to the One True Faith. We're asking the question today. It's really simple. Are you happy? Are you happy? Well, I don't know. I was happy until you started talking, Mike. Now I seem a little disillusioned, depressed, and shocked. I didn't realize I was so unhappy. I used to think I was happy. Nothing like a simple question to get things going. The question is simple because the answer is simple. Are you happy? No. No, you're not. Why? Because whatever happiness you enjoy, you know it's going to go away. You know, I love my job until you get laid off. I love this until it ends. I love such and such until they're not here anymore. All of our happiness on this earth is tied to time, if that's how we look at it. If that's how we look at it. Whatever measure of happiness that we have is always being cheated by time or by exhaustion, no matter how much fun your little 14-year-old is having at an amusement park. You know what? He's going to fall asleep eventually. He's going to wake up and he's not going to be in the amusement park anymore. 364 days I've waited for Christmas. Finally, rush down the stairs. Oh, open up the package. It's all ready to go. Oh, and it's Christmas night, and I got to go to bed, and Christmas is over. No matter what happiness we tie to, it disappears like the morning dew on earth. Nothing in this world makes or keeps us happy. Simple reason, because happiness does not reside in this world. Happiness does not reside in this life. It's only glimpsed from here, like God sort of lets the blinds up for a moment in heaven and some happiness comes and he pulls the blinds back down. Because happiness isn't here. It's up there. It's up there. It lives in eternity. In other words, you, I, all of us, were made for God. We were made for God, and nothing short of the infinite will ever fill that infinite appetite that we have, because God put that appetite in us for the infinite. Of course, you think of St. Augustine, our hearts are restless, O Lord, and they shall never find rest until they rest in you. It's your nature to desire and achieve the infinite. That's what our human nature is. That's why we advance, generally, as civilizations. That's why we make something more and a better version of it, and a new and improved, because we always have the perfect as the goal. And we build something that gets to that perfect. But in this life, we'll never get there. It's like that old mathematical thing, if you start on one side of the room and you walk to the other side of the room, if you keep walking by halves, you will never, ever reach the other side of the room. Because the distance, how do you have infinity? How do you half infinity? You don't. You'll never get to the other side of the room, ever. So, to ask somebody to settle for something other than what their nature desires would be to destroy their nature. So for the world to propose to you that, here, go buy this car, have all this money, be the guy in charge of the Playboy, empire, and you'll be happy, destroys that person's nature because they want the infinite, and you've buried them in the finite. This is why hell is hell, finally, in the last analysis. This is why hell is what it is. Made for the infinite. You, in the damned, live eternally with the finite themselves. That's the great agony of hell. You crave love. And you're right, should crave love. Even if you think you have it, and sometimes we do, it's only passing. It's only for a moment. Somebody dies, the love grows cold, something happens, and it's gone. And then it just becomes photos in an album. It vanishes. No matter how great the joy was, it vanishes, and you crash back down to that earth of desires. I want love again. Isn't this the great upsetment when we finally bury someone we love? I want them back. It's the great pain of what death is, because we can't have them back here. We need to go to where they are. So despite every straining, yearning, and groaning to find the ideals we have here, to have them satisfied here, it is the infinite which torments us. It torments us inside. We want what we are created for, and here we cannot have it. So we look at the sunset, beautiful, on fire sky, and you stop. And people will call, say, hey, get on your cell phone. Hey, have you seen the sunset? Look, it's beautiful, isn't it? And as you're talking, it's disappearing from you. It's going away as you're beholding it. On a beautiful spring evening, take a walk through the neighborhood and you smell the lilacs. Oh, that smells beautiful. Where is it? And what do? Instinctively, you go to the bush and you smell the bush. Oh, it's beautiful, it's beautiful. And we got to go, honey. You have to leave the source of that pleasure. We always want even more beauty than we now behold, whatever the moment. With feet firmly planted on earth, we are haunted by dreams of heaven. Creatures of time, we despise it because it robs us of happiness. And yet this is the only existence we've ever known, to be here in time. Why do we long for life, beauty, truth, justice, unless we have the capacity to long for them and have them? Where does this appetite come from? See how pitiful hell really is. This is how sad it is for the damned. They have an eternal hunger that will never, ever be able to be filled. As Jesus said, "Woe to you that have had your fill, you shall go hungry." This is what he's talking about. They've substituted joy for pleasure, and they've consumed and consumed and consumed, and in the process they've consumed their very natures. And when they die and go stand in front of God, God ratifies their choice for them and says, "Here, your finite pleasure shall be your eternal reward. But you're made for the infinite, and you'll never have it." How sad for the damned. How sad. Where's the source of light at noon, at midday? Where is it? People go around looking. Oh, where's it? You go into a store, look at the sunlight coming into the store as you're sitting there looking over the counter and you're mixed with fluorescent lights and store lights. You're not going to find the light in there. You're not going to find it outside. You're not going to look under a bus for the source of the light. You're not going to look down some shadowed alley that has a mix of light and darkness. You want to see the light? Step out into the pure light. Into the pure light and stand in the light. Don't hang in some mix of shadows and light. Likewise, if you want to find pure life, pure truth, pure love, you must go out into something that is pure light, pure love, pure truth. You have to go out into that. The reason someone is disappointed is because he has not yet found God. That's why people are disappointed, because they haven't found God. That's it. The closer one draws to God, the less disappointed you are. The reason for a man's unhappiness is not because of a want of fortune or spouse or fame or even nutrition. See those commercials on TV late at night, hey, you want to feel better about life? Take this pill. Ain't happening. Ain't happening. It's not due to something outside of you that you're not happy. It's due to something inside of you, a lack of something inside of us. The soul cannot be fed with husks. It's a wonderful part there in the prodigal son. Everybody talks about in the prodigal son, that the son is back and his father welcomes. And everybody concentrates on the end of that story, because it reaches its climax, and the point is the end. But before you get to that end, look at that beginning. What is it? He's sitting there, and he's like, they throw him and he longs for the husks of these swine, which was a big deal if you were a Jew back in the biblical days. He's working with pigs, remember, and he's a Jew, and pigs were forbidden to the Jews. This is how low he had become. Why? Because he'd chased his pleasures. He'd sought his happiness, and Father, give me half my estate, and he goes and spends it on dissolute living, and then he comes to the point where he has gone so low that now he wants these husks, and even those don't satisfy him. Finally, as our blessed Lord says, he came to his senses. He came to his senses. Sometimes you have to become absorbed in disgust before you finally find God. Who would think that? He finally says, when he comes to his senses, I'm going home because that's where my happiness is. If a car could talk, and it could say what made it happy, what would it say? It wouldn't say, I like sitting in a driveway covered with 10 feet of snow in a Michigan winter. It would say, I like to be driven, because that's what I am and that's what I do. If a pencil could say, this is what makes me happy, what would it say? Sitting in a box unopened? No. What makes me happy as a pencil is when someone picks me up and writes with me. That's what makes me happy. What would a house say? What makes me happy? Being abandoned and burned out? No. Having a family in me and living and going up and down my stairs and opening my windows and having barbecues out on my back lawn. That's what makes me happy as a house. Why? Because these are the reasons they were made. These are the very reasons they exist. If these things aren't happening, they have no purpose in existence. So this is the purpose they live or exist. We were made for perfect happiness. That's our existence. That's our goal. That's what we were created for. That is the meaning of life, nothing else. Don't believe those people when they tell you, go up to the mountain and the great guru up there, he will tell you the meaning of life. No. The meaning of life is inside you. It's not out there, it's in here. This is why everything short of God always disappoints. It always disappoints. And the disappointments come immediately or eventually, but they always come. How many people, you don't have to put your hands up if you're sitting next to your spouse, but how many people when made that proposal, oh, be happy, oh, blah, 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 did it stay that way every day? Don't raise your hands. I don't want to start fights after everybody's show's over. Ask yourself this, if you're giving to being more religious than cynical, if your home base is to view things from more of a religious side than a cynical, pleasure-seeking, earthly side, have you noticed how much less disappointing the pleasures of earth become? Now, we've got examples of these. You got the pleasure seeker over here is running crazy. One little thing goes wrong, and it's like World War IX. I can't believe you didn't get the milk for the bottle. Does it really matter that you didn't get the milk? Really? You know what? So you're having a bunch of guests over. You think they're all going to storm out and write you up in the newspaper because you didn't get the milk, or they're going to wait 10 extra minutes while you run to the market and get the milk? But no, for this person, because it's all about this, whatever they're giving them happiness on hosting this event. Oh, it has to be this way. Has to be this way. I was visiting with a priest who told me that the new Archbishop of Detroit, Alan Vigneron, has a wonderful line. He calls it the heresy of Martha Stewart, where you're preparing for a lunch or a dinner or something like that, that you sort of miss the whole point of the dinner because you're so big. The napkins have to be folded just right, and how could you put that silverware out here that doesn't match? Oh my God! And it's the heresy. It's the Martha Stewart heresy. When you live in this camp, you simply accept life's things for what they are. You can't get upset about these crazy things. You accept them for what they are. Are you disappointed? Sure. Would you rather have all the silverware lined up? Well, I personally could care less, but some people would like to have the silverware lined up. Sure. Would it be better if it was that way? Sure. Is it a great disaster if it's not? Are people's happiness going to be robbed from them if it's not? No. But for this person, it is. See, all of these things, all of these disappointments are just signs on the road to happiness. The disappointments are. But they're not happiness in themselves. Once you know God is your source of happiness, these things lose their ability to disappoint you. You don't become unhappy at something that doesn't have happiness in it. That's because you don't place any more hope in them than they can bear. You don't invest yourself in something that can't handle the investment. You cease looking for first-rate joy where you're only going to be able to find 10th-rate pleasures. You begin to see that all of earth's joys are legitimate pleasures given from God. He placed them on life's highway, if you want to think of them that way, dropped these beautiful little jewels on the highway to remind us of this one thought. If each of these joys and each of these pleasures, legitimate pleasures, are so beautiful, what must beauty be like? Beauty in itself. If these are just mere reflections, we look at the moon. The moon doesn't have its own light. That's the reflection of the sun. So you can look at the moon. If you ever forget about the sun, however, you've lost the point. So the moon looks beautiful, but it's not the source of the light. The sadness of life for so many people is due to becoming so enamored with the gifts that they forget the giver. But the gifts, and this is always the case, the gifts, all the joys and pleasures of life, out of a loyalty to their Maker, never deliver over perfect happiness. They won't do it out of a loyalty to God. When that happens, people become cynical, they become disillusioned. If you're a Catholic, change your axis. Disappointments are just markers on the road of life saying, perfect happiness doesn't lie here. Don't look for it here. Move on. Nothing to see here, folks. Move it along. Every frustrated desire, every sadness, every aching of the heart points to God. We get to God not only by being good, which we must do, but also through a series of disgusts. You get disgusted with the disappointments of life because they are empty. And they point you to the next one and they shuffle you down the road. Though our passions can be satisfied in this life, we will never be. Because passions can find satisfaction in this life, but we cannot. Our hearts have a hole in them. They have a hole in them, which can never be filled in this life or by anything in this life. A piece of our hearts was kept by God in heaven. He kept them, each one of us. God kept those little pieces of our hearts until we get back to Him and He makes us whole again. And that little desire that He kept and put in us, longing for the infinite, if we have been good and done what we should do in this life and longed after the infinite in the proper way, the infinite will embrace us and we will have eternal happiness, what we long for, what we were made for. We'll be right back right after this. Well, everyone, welcome back to The One True Faith. We're talking about happiness, and this is the part we hear from the audience. So, how you doing? Where are you from? What's your name?
I'm Joan from Sterling Heights, Michigan.
Hello, Joan.
Hi. Do you see a distinction between seeking God happiness in Catholicism versus other religious approaches and beliefs?
Oh, sure. Jesus founded the church so that we could have as much happiness as we could have here in this life. How that happiness comes to us could be a multitude of ways, but what is happiness? Happiness is being with God, being with the infinite. So in heaven, we will be with the infinite, with the capacity to be infinite with Him. Here, we can't be infinite because we're constrained by time and space and the material world. But we can still reach into that when we receive our Lord in Holy Communion. That's what we're doing. We are stepping into the infinite and then being sort of surrounded by the infinite. So for those few minutes, every time we receive Holy Communion, we are in the infinite, and the infinite is what happiness is. So to the extent that Catholics have that available to them, yes, there is no greater joy on this earth than being able to receive Holy Communion, because it takes us right to the source of the joy. It's not, I'm going to go to a game and I'm going to get happy. It's, I'm going to happiness itself.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, what's your name? Where are you from?
Hi, I'm Bob from Berkeley.
Hey, Bob.
I have found that many people in my family and some of my friends have gone out of their way to purposely make my life miserable in my marriage. How do I fight against that?
Well, to the extent that you don't have to be around them, I wouldn't. I don't mean that to be cruel. You should always try to, mend as many fences as you can and live as peacefully as some people as you can. But some people, some people are just kind of toxic people. They're unhappy and they like to spread their unhappiness everywhere else they can. And if that includes being, drama queens or drama kings and injecting their drama and their unhappiness into other people's lives, get away from it. Pray for them, hope they come around, always be available for them, always be willing to forgive them, regardless of how deep the hurt. But unless there's some reason you have to be around them, like, you're chained to them, don't be.
Thank
You don't
you.
need unhappy people in your life.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, what's your name? Where are you from?
Hi, Mary. I'm from Detroit.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. When you were talking, it reminded me, in light of what's been happening the past few months here in Michigan, of Father John Hardin saying that there is no such thing as bad weather because it's all part of the providence of God. But there is annoying weather. And when we have annoying weather, this gives us a chance to submit to the will of God, which is actually the source of happiness.
Well, I agree with that. I'm also a little disappointed because all I do is just complain about the cold and the snow. So it's true, but I don't do a very good job of submitting. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
Hi, what's your name? Where are you from?
I'm Kevin from Harrison Township.
How you doing, Kevin?
Doing well.
I don't like the shirt.
Well, I like it. Here's my question. For me, the time spent at Mass seeking God gives me the greatest joy.
Sure.
Is it possible God gave us this window into eternity to glimpse our destination with Him in heaven?
Absolutely. You know, two lines from Scriptures come to me immediately, and from John chapter 6, when Jesus says, he who eats my body and drinks my blood has life eternal. Well, that's what we want. Ultimately, that's what we want. That's why death is so tragic, because it seems as though life, or it feels as though life has come to an end. And that we actually get, when Jesus says, you know, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So when you eat me, he who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has life eternal. So yeah, you're going to, the earlier question, you're going to the source of the joy. You're going to joy itself. So it's like, if you like the sunlight and we were able to bear it physically, you would not stand in the sunlight. You'd go into the sun itself. That's what Mass is with receiving Jesus in Holy Communion. We go right to the joy itself. And the other line is that comes to me is when Jesus says, anyone who loves me and keeps my commandments, my Father and I will love him, and we will come to him, and we will make our home with him, in him. I mean, that's what heaven is. That's what joy is. And yeah, it is. It's a little glimpse. It's a little glimpse. It's a little partaking here on earth. That's why Eucharist means thanksgiving. What are you being thankful for? You're being thankful, and you're giving thanks for, giving thanks for participating in the source of joy, the source of life. I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. Well, it doesn't get much more full here on earth than that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, what's your name? Where are you from?
Jerry from Detroit.
Hey, Jerry from Detroit.
Mike, I just had a comment. In my life, I really haven't felt the difference in happiness in life from taking out of life what I wanted to take. But I do feel the joy in learning about my faith, and it's through your shows that help it.
Oh, well, God bless you. Thank you. Yeah, it's same here.
Hello there, Michael.
Hello, Frank from Dearborn Heights. Minus the beard.
Minus the beard. As Christians, we know that God made each and every one of us. He created us because He loves us so much. He knows us better than we can possibly know ourselves. He gave us the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament. He gives us much advice on how to be truly happy. Are there any particular passages that you would recommend to the audience, to the viewers at home or on the internet for seeking happiness?
Sure. I would, I think one place to go is, in the Gospel of John, when Jesus says, this is eternal life, that they know you and they know me, me who you have sent, who the Father has sent. This is eternal life. And certainly the Beatitudes, I mean, they've been translated as, happy, are the poor in spirit, happy. I mean, it's better blessed. I mean, blessed is a more encompassing word. If you are blessed, you are happy, but you're more than just happy. The Beatitudes. And go through those. Go through the Beatitudes in the opening chapters of Matthew, and look at those. Where all 8 of them are there in the opening chapters of Matthew. And Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Blessed are those who, mourn and weep. They shall be I'm messing up the Beatitudes. I can't believe it. Anyway, I'm a Catholic. It's a Bible thing. But, those who hunger and thirst for what is, for right, they will be satisfied. These are the keys to happiness. And what are those things? They're juxtapositions between joy and pleasure. People who are, constantly seeking after food and all this, well, they're going to be left empty. You know what? Because you digest the food and you get up the next morning, you're hungry again. But if you're looking for spiritual food and the eternal food, the more you get, the more you want, and the more you want, the more you get. There's no end to it. So essentially, all of the truth of the divine message is it's this, don't store up treasures and concentrate on things in this life. Think about the next life. And that's what the Beatitudes are. That's what the whole message of Christ is. That, you're not made for this world. You're just here in some temporary apartment lease. Sometimes the apartment's kind of in nice condition. Other times the landlord lets it get a little shabby. But it doesn't matter. You don't live here. You're just staying here. You're going to be living in heaven, and that's the point. And that's the message rife throughout all of Scripture. And that's why that's why God the Father mentions to Israel, I will give you a land, and this will be your home. And, in the book of Revelation, we have that beautiful picture that John paints of us of the new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven. That's our home. Read that beautiful, last chapter of Revelation that describes everything in heaven. Diamonds and sapphires and gold streets. And it's just, it's everything that the human mind here in this limited way can envision would be happy. And there's no end to it. And yeah, everything in Scripture is about joy versus pleasure, God versus the earth, earthly pleasures. So that's, Beatitudes is where I'd start, and after you get through them and don't mess them up like I did, concentrate on these. Yeah, they're beautiful. They're beautiful.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frank. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back to a couple of closing thoughts on, are you happy? You notice how everything in the Bible and everything in the faith and everything in our daily lives, our experience is sort of divided in two, right down the middle. Ultimately, everything goes right down the middle. You have on one side salvation, and on the other side you have damnation. You have good, you have bad. You have joy, you have pleasure. Everything. God has made it exceedingly simple for us. He really has. He's made it very simple for us. That's why when, and it always comes down to a choice, yes or no, this way or that way, right or left, whatever you want to do. That's why the serpent comes along and says, hey, Eve, look at this beautiful fruit. See, it's pleasing to the eye. Isn't it wonderful? It'll give you everything you want, liar. It'll give you everything you want. So what does she do? She reaches out and she takes it. And the second she takes a bite into it, she realizes it's not what was told her. Because she went after a pleasure when she should have stayed with God and gone after a joy. And the joy was remaining with God in obedience. Because of Adam and Eve and the seeking after pleasure, we're all standing here saying, wait until I get in front of them. I got some splaining to do, and they got some splaining to do. Everything in life is a choice between joy and pleasure. Everything in life. That's why we fast during Lent and other times of the year, so that we have control and mastery over our pleasures. When our pleasures take control of us, we are bound up in a chain. When we take control of our pleasures, we set our feet firmly on the path to joy and ultimately end up in heaven. It's just that simple. It's always just that simple. Joy or pleasure? Pick. Choose wisely. God love you.